serial killer culture. And some of the artists even contributed new artwork for the book. They actually did new paintings or drawings just for the book, or some submitted some that they had already. And, again, I thought that it would be an awesome view, not just of Dahmer, but of the whole serial killer culture surrounding him.
I got to get into this because I'm going to forget if I don't. And this isn't technically a serial killer, but obviously it was covered in the serial killer culture documentary, Charles Manson.
Right.
And I only bring him up because he just passed away. What are your thoughts on people that, were posting RIP Charles Manson and things like that? Like, I mean, are they callous, or do they just don't really see that as reality?
Who counts? The people that feel for him, or the people that are against
the people that are posting like RIP Charles Manson, and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, but I mean, think about what he was, at least responsible for.
I know, and that's a double-edged sword too, because again, our society has built Manson up to be a celebrity, just like all these other serial killers. And yes, Manson wasn't a serial killer. You'd probably go on the street now, like they do these, man on the street interviews, and ask people who Manson was. Most people would probably say, oh, yeah, he was a serial killer. Because, of course, he's, again, lumped into this culture because he was the mastermind, cult leader behind these murders, supposedly. And, that's why he's kind of lumped into it. I don't know. I mean, I kind of understand the people that post rest in peace and these other people, because I know personally people that have written to him for 5, 10, 20 years in prison. So they did have somewhat of a relationship to him. One of the gentlemen is Michael Channels, who Manson, left all of his estate to, which is pretty interesting. What his estate consists of, who knows? But Michael Channels had been writing Manson for 20 or more years. And I interviewed him. He's going to be in the next season of Serial Killer Culture. He took me on a tour, which will also be in the show, of the area near Spahn Ranch, the kind of iconic area where the family hung out, where the rock was. It was kind of this little cave, and then he shows off his collection of Manson items and tells what he believes Manson really is about, because he knows him as a person rather than just a soundbite, or rather than just what we're being told by people. And I personally, always say that my one regret in all my films was I called Holmes a monster, because they're not monsters. Once they're apprehended, they don't turn green. They don't have, 5 eyes. They're still human beings. And I believe it's our job as a society to figure out why they became what they became. So I understand some of these people's perspectives. Imagine if you're writing to somebody for 5, 10, 20 years and they pass away, some of these people say, I don't know what to feel. I don't know if I should, feel sad or, bad because of what he did. So again, people have to take that into consideration, that our society has made him a celebrity, and also, given access to him to write and receive letters.
How did you feel personally when Manson passed away? He's 84, so I mean, it's not like he just was put to death. You know what I mean? Like, he lived a full life technically. You know what I mean?
Yeah, each time I didn't feel anything personally. Each time, though, one of these iconic, and again, they are iconic, serial killers or celebrities or true crime figures passed away, I always feel it's an end of an era. Just as when Richard Ramirez passed away, and Ian Brady recently, and now Manson, again, because we kind of know these true crime cases, and, it's weird. They've almost become our, league of serial killer gentlemen, you know what I mean? Because we know them so well, and then, when the first league is gone, it's like, oh, well, who are we left with now? Who's alive now? We've got Berkowitz. The greatest of the greats are gone, and we say that in a little bit of a joking sense, but the greatest meaning the ones that are so iconic that we remember them because of what they've done, or the news and celebrity status that they held. So we, like I said, we have Berkowitz, we have Kemper. Those are there's probably a handful or two that are some of those really truly kind of celebrity serial killers that are left.
When we talk about celebrity serial killers, and that's a great term for it, because that's like exactly what they are, especially after the show Mindhunter. I bet you a lot of people didn't know who Edmund Kemper was before that show. Now that they've seen it, he ranks up there with a lot of these quote-unquote celebrity serial killers. But along those lines, I feel like Charles Manson kind of started that all. I mean, see if you agree with me, but because before that, who was there before Manson that really got the public invested in the same way? I can't think of anybody.
No, you're right. And that's the thing, too. I've kind of studied the sociological aspects of these serial killers because when you think about it, when you go back, say, a little over 100 years, yes, Jack the Ripper, Jack the Ripper was huge. But as you go back in time and start moving forward through time, you look at the advent of the ability of the media to publicize these murders. So you look at Jack the Ripper, well, that's the beginnings of the newspaper, really, in a sense. Newspapers were around before that, but, it was the newspaper that really spread the word about Jack the Ripper. And then when you move forward in time, you have the roving news camera, the ability for news to be brought out of the studio and the cameras to be taken into the field, remotely. And that's what, that began with the Manson case. And then right after that, the Gacy case. And then now, we keep moving forward in time. We have the internet to where, there's a guy that kills his teacher and takes a picture of it or broadcasts it on the internet. And there was this guy in Japan who had 9 or more bodies in his apartment because he didn't want to get caught, so he left them all in his apartment, but he would lure them over the internet because there's this big suicide club, and he would tell these young women that he would help them commit suicide, and he would kill them, but he kept their bodies, and he would cover them with, like, cat litter, and they found all these bodies in his apartment. So each new technology that comes out, the serial killer or criminal is just going to use that to their benefit, and, of course, the media is going to pick it up and spread it out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, the thing about that, though, is, absolutely, Jack the Ripper did start it all. But since we got into a subject of somebody like Jack the Ripper, and you mentioned him earlier, I mean, you obviously weren't on the side, neither am I, by the way, that he was H.H. Holmes. I don't think I don't think that holds water. But it is an unsolved case, and those are always interesting. But it's not something that I could think of, anyway, that you've really touched on a lot. Like, I don't recall you writing about Zodiac or doing a film about Zodiac. Is there any unsolved multiple murders that you're interested in kind of researching and doing a full book or documentary on?
The Cleveland torso murders have always fascinated me, not only because of the fact that, there were these torsos that were, thrown about, the city of Cleveland, Ohio, but because of the number one, the time period, and number two, that Elliot Ness was involved right off of, capturing Al Capone, one of the biggest gangsters in history. He cannot solve this murder of all these, torsos that are being thrown around Cleveland. And, eventually, that was kind of a stain on his record. And that may have ultimately, led to him committing suicide. Who knows? But, it was definitely was tragic. But, that would be the only unsolved case that I'd be interested in, because I'm interested in cases where the serial killer criminals apprehended because they did speak with them. They did talk to them. We may have gleaned, something from that, but not too much from H.H. Holmes because, Holmes never even, saw a psychiatrist. So there, it was that psychiatry was in its infancy. But then as you start moving forward, yes, Fish did. And these others may have, spoke to a psychiatrist or psychologist, and we may be able to learn something from them. But, of course, is the New Orleans axe murderer and Zodiac, there are many unsolved cases. But, I'm interested in the story a little bit, but not ultimately probably to make a film or a book about it, other than like the torso, again, that case. I'm fascinated by that case.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's what's great about some of the things you do is the works that you do, a lot of them anyway, and obviously off the Dahmer subject again, but we're talking about Jesse Pomeroy, we're talking about H.H. Holmes, we're talking about pre-modern media. I know there was media, but not the way that we think of now. So I'm always I'm always just so stunned by how much you're able to find out. And you're not making conclusions, you're getting this information. How hard is the research on these old cases?
It's really difficult, and as the years go by, it becomes even more difficult because a lot of the material is either destroyed or lost or sitting in a moldy basement, and then it has to be destroyed, or finding it. Finding it is part of the fun. I do enjoy the research phase. Like right now with Jesse Pomeroy that I'm working on. Tomorrow, I'm interviewing Matthew Short, who works at the Special Collections Department of Northeastern Illinois University, and they have, other than Library of Congress, they have the world's largest collection of dime novels. They have like 40,000 in their collection. And again, it's the same concept. As we go back in time, you look at 1874 when Pomeroy was murdering little children smaller than him. There were no video games. There were no movies. There was no music in the home. They didn't have any of these things to blame for Jesse Pomeroy's actions, but they did blame the dime novels. They had to blame something, and the dime novels were, these novels that were sold obviously for 10 cents, 5 or 10 cents, but many of them were lurid or, stories of cowboys and Indians, because of course that was, not long after, everything, occurred with, cowboys and Indians in the USA and scalpings and, people being tied up and held captive, or, lurid sex novels. And that's what these children would read at the time period. So that's what many people blamed. There's, even some people out there that believe they're totally to blame for Jesse Pomeroy's actions. They don't take into account the fact that he was most likely bullied because he had a bad white eye, and the fact that his, father abused him. There were other factors as well. But, again, I think that's what I kind of enjoy about, the documentaries, and that it's not just focusing on the horrific acts of these serial killers, but the forensics, the time period that they lived in, as well as the psychology, if, anything could be gleaned from that. But, again, the time period is very interesting too, because there was one point in the Jesse Pomeroy story where when the little boy was murdered, when he murdered the little boy in the one police district, that police district had no idea that Jesse Pomeroy was released from reform school. So what did they do immediately? They got on their telegraph and telegraphed the other police department, and then they had to wait to hear a response. They can't look it up on the internet. They can't pick up their cell phone. That's, again, I'm fascinated by that technology or lack of technology as well of these cases, and that makes them unique.
And I always think it's cool how you paint a picture of the time period as well. I mean, in the documentaries, but you do it for, in written as well. But on the subject of movies, let me get into something that you've talked about a few times. I know in your area there's a lack of independent theaters, like theaters that won't. Okay, I'll give you an example. Here in Louisville, Kentucky, I've got a theater right down the road. They're not even playing The Man Who Invented Christmas. I don't know how that doesn't get to a big theater. I mean, it's a big production, but somehow it doesn't make it to this theater. And I think that's, it's something that you've mentioned lately, is that you're not getting these types of films in your area. And what's up with that?
Yeah, even with this release of My Friend Dahmer, it was very strange, because they were initially, when it opened up on, I think it was November 3rd, it wasn't playing at all in Chicago or Wisconsin. I mean, Illinois or Wisconsin at all, period. And I'm like, okay, aren't these the two main, these should have been the first places that aired. But who knows if they were afraid because of the backlash, but it doesn't matter. I mean, you're still going to, sell tickets. But then eventually they did open it up, and I wound up seeing I had to drive an hour into the suburbs to see it, And, it is getting more difficult. I mean, there's a huge issue now, obviously, with this change in media and streaming. And, there's always, every 5 years, there's, always some sort of a change. When you go back, it's 4K. Before that, it was Blu-ray. Then it was DVD. Then it was Laserdisc. I've had almost all these formats, VHS, Beta. You keep, so they have to, obviously change these formats to, keep, making new income, or, they never do it. But